In the hush of morning, before the wind had fully risen and the dust of the west had begun its restless dance, the prairie lay still as a sleeping child. The sun was not yet bold enough to spill its full gold across the land, only touching gently the tops of tall grass and the soft buds of wildflowers that swayed like shy maidens in their Sunday best. Among them, a figure moved with care, not so much walking as threading herself through the world. Lily Bell Franklin was hardly taller than the stalk she passed, her bonnet tilted just enough to catch the light that dappled through it. To the eyes of strangers, she might have seemed misplaced in the wide, untamed country, a girl built like a whisper in a land that demanded thunder. But she moved like one born of this soil, with a rhythm that matched the breath of it. She did not hurry. She never had. The town of Harmony Ridge sat like a faded photograph on the edge of a long horizon, buildings sun-bleached and leaning a little from the years. Lily had known every board and nail since childhood, having arrived at age 9 with nothing but a patched-up dress and the ghost of her mother's lullabies still clinging to her. Her aunt, Mirabelle Franklin, had taken her in, a stern widow who ran the millinery with the precision of a clockmaker and loved Lily in the hard, roundabout way some women did, through discipline and the quiet placing of extra bread on a dinner plate. Though others never said it directly, Lily knew what they thought. Too small. Too fragile. She could ride but never reach the saddle without a crate. Could sew but needed a cushion beneath her to work the pedal. Her laughter, when it came, was soft and caught easily in the wind. But her spirit was not weak. It was simply quiet, the way tree roots are quiet, growing steadily beneath where eyes do not look. Lily was to be married in 3 days. The thought sat strange in her chest, like tea gone cold. It wasn't fear, exactly. Nor was it joy. It was something between, a dull ache of duty mixed with a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this was what belonging might feel like. Lem Garrison had chosen her. A rancher's son with sun-scorched skin and a swagger that made boots echo louder than steps. He was not cruel. Nor was he kind. He was simply there, and Lily had learned that sometimes, being seen, even if dimly, was enough to keep a heart from breaking. She passed old Eustace the blacksmith, who lifted his hat with a nod. His eyes lingered, not out of admiration, but a soft concern he never voiced. Everyone knew of the wedding. The town wasn't big enough for secrets. The preacher's wife had already started cutting lace. At home, the kitchen smelled of cornbread and sweet tallow soap. Aunt Mirabelle stood at the stove, her back stiff, her gray hair pinned into its usual war-ready bun. "You're back late," she said, without turning. "I was with the lilies," Lily murmured, setting a bundle of them down gently on the table. "They're blooming early." Aunt Mirabelle grunted. "Means a dry season." There was no hug, no touch. But Mirabelle sliced the cornbread thinner than usual and slid the end piece, Lily's favorite, onto her plate. That night, Lily lay in bed listening to the hush between gusts of prairie wind. Her wedding dress hung near the window, white as clouded milk. It was simple, borrowed from her aunt's younger days. She had taken it in herself, needle shaking only a little as she stitched the hem to fit her smaller frame. She wondered if Lem would notice, or care. When she dreamed, it was not of wedding bells, but of her mother singing by the firelight, voice like river water and just as gone. Morning came with the clatter of hooves and the buzz of nervous whispers. 3 days folded into one, and now the day had arrived. The chapel stood proud and humble at once, a wooden cross above its door catching the full light of noon. Inside, Lily stood with her hands folded tight, bouquet of lilies cradled like a fragile promise. Her heart beat with quiet force beneath her ribs, not fast, but deep, like a drum muffled under layers of cloth. The guests filled the pews, neighbors, shopkeepers, the preacher's wide-eyed daughters. Faces turned as the doors opened. But it was not Lem who entered. It was his brother first. Then his father, looking grave. Then, finally, Lem, late, unshaven, with a look on his face like he'd swallowed a stone and couldn't spit it out. He reached the altar, glanced down at Lily, and his mouth tightened. She's shorter than I thought," he muttered. Not loudly, but not low enough. It passed through the chapel like a winter draft. Lily blinked once. The lilies trembled in her grip. Lem's hands fumbled with his cuffs. I can't. I just can't." He turned, boots echoing, and walked out without another word. No one moved at first. Not even the preacher. Silence swept over the room like a storm cloud. Lily inhaled. Just once. Then, with care, she placed the bouquet on the pulpit and stepped down the aisle. Her chin did not rise, nor did it fall. Her eyes, clear and unreadable, looked straight ahead. She passed each face like pages in a book she'd already read. Outside, the sun was fierce but hollow. Dust lifted around her feet. Somewhere, a child cried softly, hushed by a mother who didn't know what to say. She did not cry. She walked until the chapel was no longer in sight. Past the townsfolk who didn't speak. Past the curious, the pitying, the confused. Her wedding dress collected dirt and grass, but she did not lift the hem. Let it catch the world. Let it carry her grief. The edge of town came fast, as though the land wanted to meet her pain with its own wide quiet. There, at the last fence post, she stopped. She did not know what came next. Only that she could not return. She turned toward the open plains, and for the first time in weeks, breathed fully. Behind her, someone approached, not with haste, not with urgency, but with intention. The footsteps were slow, solid. She turned, expecting another whisper of condolence. Instead, she saw a man she barely recognized. Tall, dressed plainly. A beard like river stone. Eyes not sharp, but steady. He held no flowers. Only his coat in his hands. When he reached her, he did not offer pity. He did not speak. He simply draped the coat over her shoulders and stood beside her, eyes on the land. And though not a word passed between them, Lily Bell Franklin understood one thing with crystal certainty. Some people arrive not to rescue, but to witness. And that, sometimes, is enough to begin again. The morning broke with the weight of quiet expectation. Sunlight stretched its golden fingers across Harmony Ridge, warming the dewed fields and wood-paneled porches with the promise of celebration. The chapel, a simple white structure at the end of a narrow path, stood ready. Polished floors, fresh paint on the doorframe, and a soft scattering of daisies along the windowsills. Inside, the pews were already half filled with townsfolk in their Sunday best, hats removed, voices low. The air held a curious tension, like breath held too long. Lily Bell Franklin stood behind the chapel, in the small vestibule where brides waited in solitude. Her hands rested gently against the skirt of her dress, smoothing imaginary wrinkles with fingers that barely trembled. The gown hung loose at the shoulders, fitted only by hours of her own careful stitching. Her aunt had helped with the buttons that morning, not speaking much, only adjusting the collar as if it mattered more than it did. Lily's bonnet had been traded for a single sprig of baby's breath, pinned behind her ear. She watched dust stir through a crack in the window and imagined it was wind trying to get in. The door creaked open and the preacher's wife entered, her round face warm but hesitant. She handed Lily a bouquet of prairie lilies, fresh, fragrant, gathered with intention. "Just about time, child," she said gently, though she didn't meet Lily's eyes for long. Lily gave a soft nod, barely moving her head. Her voice came as a whisper wrapped in breath. "Is he here?" "Soon," was the reply. The preacher's wife left the door open behind her. Lily stepped forward, into the narrow hall that led to the chapel proper. From behind the curtain, she could hear the subtle shifting of the crowd, boots scuffing wood, throats clearing, the murmured sigh of someone folding a fan. Her breath slowed, eyes soft and still. She was not excited, not afraid. What she felt was something else entirely, something unnameable, as if her whole self were waiting to see whether this would be the moment life finally folded her in. She heard the doors open. Voices quieted. She waited for the music. But it didn't begin. Instead, a longer pause. The scrape of a boot dragging. Then, louder now, the sound of someone entering alone. Through the curtain's edge, she glimpsed Lem Garrison. He looked different. Not dressed as he had promised. His vest was wrinkled, and his collar wilted in the heat. His hair had not been combed clean. There was a line of sweat across his brow, but no sign of nerves in his stance. Only reluctance, like a man dragging a plow he never meant to harness. He reached the altar and stood still. The preacher, already in place, looked toward the back, then toward Lem. His expression shifted. The curtain stirred behind Lily. She stepped forward. The hush in the chapel grew deeper. It wasn't reverence, it was uncertainty. She entered the aisle. Gasps rose from a few lips, though quickly stilled. The chapel held its breath. Lily walked slowly, her eyes not darting, but resting on one point at a time. The old beam above the door, the way the light fell through the window, the bow on the youngest girl's braid in the front pew. Each step was a quiet vow to herself. She did not feel beautiful. She felt present, and that would have to be enough. Lem didn't reach for her hand when she arrived. Instead, he stepped back a fraction. Barely a movement, but clear. She turned toward him. His eyes flicked to the guests, then down to her. His lips parted. What came out was not planned. It was not kind. "She's smaller than I thought." It was a murmur, but it rolled through the room like thunder in a canyon. The preacher's mouth closed. Lily's breath caught. No one spoke. Lem shifted again, his jaw tight. "I'm sorry. I can't." He looked at the preacher, then the crowd, then finally back at Lily with something close to guilt but not quite. "I can't marry her," he said. "Not like this." He turned, shoulders hunched, and walked away. His footsteps clapped across the chapel floor, then softened as the door closed behind him. The silence left behind was a shape of its own. Not shock, not sorrow. Just vastness. Stillness. Lily stood in it. 1 second. Then 2. She blinked, but did not lower her head. With quiet hands, she reached up and adjusted the sprig of baby's breath. Then, she stepped to the pulpit, set the lilies down as gently as if they were her mother's favorite teacup, and turned. No one moved. As she walked back down the aisle, she passed faces that tried to offer comfort in glances, but none could reach her. Their silence was a wall. Their pity, a heavy cloth she did not care to wear. She stepped into the sun alone. Outside, the wind had picked up. The prairie stretched endlessly, sky like a faded quilt stitched by years of sun. The grass bowed with the breeze, not in mourning but in rhythm. Life, indifferent and steady. She walked until she was past the chapel, then past the steps, and into the open road where the air tasted like dry sage and beginnings. A child ran from her mother's grip and toward Lily, offering a dropped flower petal from the ceremony. The mother rushed after, whispering apologies, pulling the child back. Lily smiled at the girl, a smile that held no bitterness. Then she kept walking. No tears fell. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. She reached the bridge that crossed the shallow creek, the one she used to sit beneath as a child with her feet in the water, dreaming of what life might bring when she grew tall. She wasn't tall now, but she was grown. And that, she thought, was something. A rider passed behind her, slowing his horse as he neared. It wasn't Lem. It was August Hale. He did not speak. He simply watched her from the shade of his wide-brimmed hat, then dismounted quietly and approached. He didn't extend his hand. He didn't bow or apologize or offer her his name. He knew she knew it. She'd sold him a button once at her aunt's shop, and she remembered the way he had thanked her as if she'd done something far greater than find the right size. Today, he did nothing grand. Just took off his coat and held it out to her. Lily hesitated, then accepted it. Not because she was cold, but because it seemed right. He walked beside her. Not close enough to crowd her, not far enough to be distant. Just there. Together, they crossed the bridge and headed into the wide openness beyond, where no one had yet decided what story must be told. Behind them, the chapel faded from view. And ahead of them, the horizon waited without judgment. The rain began that night. Not in a storm, not in a fury, but with a steady, weeping gentleness that soaked into the earth as if the sky had finally decided to share its sorrow. The kind of rain that softened fences, quieted chickens, and brought the scent of tilled soil into every corner of Harmony Ridge. Lily sat by the window of her room, the cotton coat folded neatly over her lap. She had not spoken much since the wedding that wasn't. Not because she was angry. Not because she didn't have words. but because nothing she could say felt truer than silence. Her aunt moved through the house like a careful ghost, folding linens tighter than they needed to be, boiling the tea longer than it required. She did not ask questions. Instead, she left warm bread by Lily's door and adjusted the curtains so the light might fall more kindly on her face. The coat still smelled faintly of wood smoke and fresh cotton. August Hale had said nothing when he gave it to her. Not a word. But something in the gesture had settled into Lily's chest and grown roots. He had not rushed to fix her pain, nor pretended not to see it. He had simply shown up. The next day, he returned, not with apologies or questions, but with a bundle of raw cotton, pure white and gathered by hand. "It's from the far field," he said, placing it on her porch table. "Thought you might quilt with it." Lily looked down at the cotton. Her fingers brushed the soft tufts. "It's clean." He nodded. "Always is, if you pick it careful." She didn't ask why he'd come. He didn't explain. After that, he came often. Not daily. Just enough for the visits to feel like a pattern rather than a surprise. He would bring small things, beeswax candles, a jar of preserves, once a book of pressed flowers with a note inside written in slow, careful script. "Thought you might like the lavender best." Sometimes he stayed to talk. Sometimes he just sat while Lily mended fabric or shelled peas. His voice was low, roughened by dust and quiet days, but his words always felt deliberate, placed with intention like stones along a garden path. Lily learned he had lost his wife 3 winters past. Consumption, quick and cruel. He didn't speak of it much, but once, while watching the evening clouds, he said her name, Maribel, as if testing whether it still echoed. He owned a modest cotton mill at the southern edge of town. Not large, but kept in fair condition. Hired only local hands. Paid them well. The town respected him, though few claimed to know him deeply. Lily began to wonder how many people simply preferred to stay unknown. One afternoon, he found her by the stream, sleeves rolled as she gathered wild mint. He didn't call out, just stepped near and knelt beside her, pulling a few leaves himself with practiced hands. "You always do things quiet," Lily said softly. He looked at her, eyes the color of worn stone. "Noise doesn't make the work truer." She smiled then. Not the shy, folded smile she gave to townsfolk in passing, but one that touched her eyes, as if something inside her had just remembered warmth. They sat a while without speaking, the mint piled between them. Bees droned lazily around the blossoms, and the clouds rolled like ships across the sky. Later that week, he brought her a basket. Inside, fabric scraps dyed in soft colors. Clay red, prairie green, milk blue. "You could quilt something new," he said. Lily ran her fingers across the cloth. "Most folks would offer a dress." He tilted his head. "A dress is for show. Quilts are for keeping warm." She met his gaze. "You think I need warmth?" "No," he said, slow and certain. "But I think you deserve it." The days turned longer. The air smelled of hay and harvest. Lily found herself looking toward the road in the afternoons, half hoping he'd appear. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he didn't. But when he was gone, the silence no longer felt so hollow. One day, he arrived with a wooden box. "It was Maribel's," he said. "She kept thread in it." Lily opened it slowly. Inside, a thimble, a rusted needle, and a slip of cloth with the beginnings of a stitch, a daisy halfway finished. "I never could throw it out," he said. "Figured maybe it'd like a second try." Lily didn't speak for a long moment. Then she placed the box on her lap and rested her hand over it gently. "You're not trying to fix me," she said, more observation than question. "No," August replied. "I just want to see what you make next." That evening, Lily began to sew, not out of obligation, not from the ache of proving herself, but because her fingers itched for rhythm. The quilt came slowly, one patch at a time, stitched from memory and cotton. The hem of her old wedding dress became a border. The lilies from that day, embroidered in the center, bloomed again. In town, people began to notice. The grocer asked after her. The preacher's wife came to call, bringing extra sugar. Folks talked less of the wedding and more of how she'd carried herself after. Lem Garrison returned once. Walked into the shop, hat in hand, face uncertain. "I didn't handle things right," he said. Lily met his eyes, calm as a lake before dawn. "No," she agreed. "But I thank you for your honesty." He looked relieved, confused. "I wish you well, Lem," she added, with a softness that surprised even her. He nodded, shuffled his boots, and left. He didn't come back. Later that week, August arrived to help fix the roof. He climbed with practiced ease, hands steady, boots sure. Lily watched from below, handing him tools, laughing once when he dropped a nail and muttered something under his breath. "You've got a good laugh," he said when he came down. "It's rare," she replied. "Then I'll try to earn it again." They sat side by side that evening, watching the stars stitch themselves into the sky. "Did you ever think you'd marry again?" Lily asked. August was quiet for a long time. "Didn't think I'd want to. And now?" He looked at her. Not through her. Not around her. At her. "I think I'd like to stand beside someone again. Not to fix. Not to carry. Just to stand." Lily's eyes did not shy away. "Me too." They did not speak of love. Not yet. It was something deeper they shared, like two seeds planted near each other, growing slowly in the same soil. As the days shortened and the wind carried the first promise of autumn, Lily placed the last stitch in the quilt. It was not perfect, but it was warm and full of color. She folded it carefully and set it on the porch swing. August arrived not long after, with a loaf of bread still warm from his kitchen. Lily lifted the quilt, spread it over both their shoulders, and said, simply, "Stay a while." And he did. The morning sun filtered through the cotton curtains like honey poured through gauze, slow and amber and warm. It painted long streaks across the wooden floorboards of the Franklin house, and in their stillness, Lily sat sewing by the window. The needle moved in patient rhythm, her fingers guiding it through soft cotton with care learned not from textbooks or instructors, but from quiet hours spent listening to fabric, watching how it folded and yielded and carried the weight of warmth. Outside, the wind tickled the tall grass, and birds sang their slow, lonesome songs, the kind that made a heart ache and swell at the same time. August Hale had not visited for 3 days. It wasn't unusual. He came and went like the tide, never overstepping, never assuming. But absence, Lily had come to realize, was more noticeable when it was gentle hands you missed. She found herself looking toward the road out of habit now, not with yearning, but with a softness she hadn't known she still possessed. When he did arrive that afternoon, she was in the garden, sleeves rolled up, elbow-deep in the stubborn roots of a creeping weed that had taken to choking the marigolds. She heard the horse before she saw him, the slow clop of hooves on dirt. She didn't look up right away, not until he dismounted and approached, hat in hand, his shadow falling beside hers. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. Lily leaned back on her heels, brushing soil from her hands. "It's always where I end up when something's on my mind." He crouched beside her, pulling off his gloves. "What's on your mind?" She studied the marigolds. How something so bright can be so easy to miss until it's nearly gone. August nodded. Sometimes the loudest colors are the quietest flowers. She glanced at him then. "And what brings you?" He reached into his satchel and pulled out a book. Worn leather cover, pages yellowed with age. It was my mother's. A collection of poems. "I thought maybe you'd want to read one aloud with me sometime." Lily took the book, turning it in her hands as if it were a relic. "You keep giving me things." "I give what I have," he said. "You make it feel useful." They sat there in the dirt, sun lowering behind them. There was no rush, no plan. Just the sound of wind and the slow hum of something that felt like understanding. In the weeks that followed, they spent more time together, not in grand gestures or courtship rituals, but in the quiet routine of shared space. August helped her fix the porch rail. Lily taught him how to bake biscuits that didn't come out hard as fence posts. They read from the poetry book in the evenings, trading stanzas like secrets, smiling at the lines that stirred something in them both. He showed her how cotton was processed, how it moved from plant to bale, cleaned, combed, spun. His hands were deft and respectful, never forcing, only guiding. Lily watched the fibers stretch and twist, rawness turn to thread. She thought about that often, how something coarse could be coaxed into softness with time and patience. One late afternoon, they sat on the mill porch, sipping sweet tea. The sun had dipped just enough to cast a bronze tint across the fields, and the smell of cotton drifted like memory on the wind. August turned to her. "Do you know what silk's made from?" She shook her head. "Worms," he said. "Little caterpillars, working in silence. They spin themselves into something delicate, something fine." Lily smiled. "So even the lowliest creatures can create beauty." He looked at her then with a gaze that didn't try to pierce, but rather to hold. "Sometimes it's the ones closest to the ground who carry the strongest threads." She lowered her eyes, that soft warmth blooming in her chest again. It came without warning these days, as natural as breath. But not everyone looked on their closeness with grace. Harmony Ridge was a small town, and small towns noticed everything. There were whispers now, around the general store, at the post office, in the pews before Sunday sermon. Some said August was too old, too weathered. Others said Lily had moved on too quickly, that she should have carried her heartbreak a little longer for decency's sake. Lily heard them. She always had. She'd lived her life under the weight of sideways glances, of opinions disguised as concern. But she'd grown tired of bending herself into shapes that pleased others. And when August came by one morning with a hand-carved spindle for her quilting, she took it without hesitation, letting the townsfolk wonder. Still, one voice among the many stung more than most. Her Aunt Mirabelle. They sat at the table that evening, the stew untouched between them. "You see him too much," Mirabelle said. Lily didn't respond right away. She reached for her spoon, stirred the stew, let the silence stretch. "I see him just enough. He's not what your mother would have wanted." "My mother isn't here to want anything." Mirabelle stiffened. "People talk. They always have. Doesn't mean they're right." The old woman sighed, a sound like wood creaking in wind. "You were hurt, Lily. You need time." Lily looked up, her voice steady. "Time is not a thing I wait for to tell me how I feel. It's something I live. And I'm living it." Mirabelle said nothing more. But the distance settled between them like dust, soft but stubborn. The next morning, August didn't come. Nor the next. Lily stitched instead. Her quilt grew larger, the center now a bloom of lilies surrounded by cotton fields, the border shaped from the pieces of her old wedding dress, now faded to ivory. On the third day, he arrived again. No flowers, no bundle in hand. Just August, standing at the fence, hat in hand, the sky behind him a soft gray, heavy with the scent of coming rain. Lily stepped out to meet him. "Did you need time?" she asked, voice calm but not cold. "No," he said. "I needed to listen to the wind a while. It reminded me not to let other people's noise become my own voice." She nodded, folding her hands in front of her. "It gets loud, doesn't it?" He looked at her, not smiling, but eyes warm. "Quieter when I'm near you." They walked then, past the house, through the fields where cotton bowed to the breeze. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. At the edge of the field, they stopped. "I've been thinking," August said. "Not about proposals. Not about weddings. Just about partnership." Lily tilted her head. "And what does that look like to you?" "Two people growing toward the same sun. Side by side. Not rushing. Not pulling. Just choosing each other every day." Lily turned to him fully, the wind tugging at her skirt. "And what if the sun moves?" "Then we move with it," he said. "Together." That night, Lily placed her finished quilt on her bed. She lay beneath it with the window open, letting the night air carry in the scent of cotton, wood smoke, and rain. She slept without dreaming, wrapped in something that felt not like love's fire, but love's hearth, steady, enduring, quietly warm. The next day, she wore her tallest boots, the ones that gave her a little more reach, and walked into town with her head high. She stopped at the grocer's, the post office, the chapel. People looked, and she looked back. No shame. No explanations. She found August at the mill, sleeves rolled, his hands full of thread. "Have you ever made silk?" she asked. He looked up, brow lifted slightly. "No. Just cotton." She stepped closer. "Would you like to learn?" He set down the thread. "With you. With me." And so, they did. Not all at once. Not with vows or ribbons or crowds. But in the way threads become fabric, slowly, stitch by stitch, until one day you wrap it around yourself and realize it's home. The day began with wind. Not a fierce one, but a wild, laughing wind that tugged at the curtains and rattled the porch swing, as if it were eager to announce something the earth had waited too long to say. Lily rose with it, the hem of her nightgown brushing the newly polished floor as she crossed the room. Outside the window, the cotton fields had burst into full bloom overnight, white blossoms catching the morning light like the sky had snowed only on her land. It was a sight that made her pause. She had grown up believing that weddings were meant to be grand, gilded with lace, heavy with witness, filled with ceremony and expectation. But now, standing barefoot in her home, she understood that the truest things didn't require noise. They needed stillness, presence, willing hands, a heart that knew how to remain. August had arrived at dawn, quiet as always. His coat smelled of tobacco and warm cedar. He waited on the porch, hat in hand, wearing a shirt Lily had mended for him the week before. It fit better now, the fabric softer from repeated wear. His boots were dusty, his expression unreadable in the early light, but when she stepped outside, he looked at her like the wind itself had stopped to make room. "I didn't want to knock," he said, "if you weren't sure." Lily stood before him, face turned slightly to the morning sun. "I was sure yesterday," she answered, "but I wanted the light to agree with me." He smiled, the kind of smile that didn't try to prove anything, only confessed. They walked together across the field. The grass had turned gold with the season, but the cotton held firm, white against the fading world, a last flourish of summer's generosity. A few neighbors had been invited, not many. Aunt Mirabel, despite her usual tight-lipped ways, stood near the tree line with her arms folded, her best dress pressed flat as Sunday prayer. Her eyes did not shine, but they held no resistance either. There was a quiet truce in her gaze, and perhaps a small, buried pride. Reverend Harmon stood beneath the cottonwood tree that August had planted 5 years ago. It was taller now, its branches stretched like arms into the sky. Beneath its shade, a patchwork quilt had been laid out, Lily's quilt. The one stitched from Moments. Her old wedding dress hem had become a border of lilies, and August's cotton scraps softened its center. They did not walk down an aisle. They walked together. No one rose from pews. There were no pews. Only the wind, the cotton, and the steady hush of the world listening. When they reached the tree, Lily turned toward August. She wore no veil, only a ribbon in her hair, and a smile that had grown out of soil and sorrow and slow, sweet mornings. August looked at her, not as a man dazzled, but as one moved, by reverence, not possession. The Reverend spoke softly, his voice barely rising above the rustle of leaves. "Why have you come?" August answered, his tone sure but tender. "To stand beside her. Not to rescue. Not to promise things I can't know. But to walk the rest of the way." The Reverend turned to Lily. "And you?" Lily's voice held no tremble. "Because he sees me without asking me to change. Because he waited when others turned away. And because I am no longer small when I am with him." The Reverend smiled. "And do you bind yourselves to each other freely?" "We do," they said as one. There were no rings. Instead, Lily reached into her pocket and took out a spool of thread, silk white, thin but strong. August extended his hand, and she wound it once around his wrist, then once around hers. A single knot tied, delicate, perfect. "I don't want a chain," she said. "Just something that reminds me we chose this. Every day." August kissed her palm. Then the wind lifted again, tousling Lily's hair and tugging at the quilt corners. It carried the scent of cotton and soil and the soft hum of the living world. There was no applause, only smiles, and the subtle stillness of something sacred. After the vows, there was food, simple, good. Bread still warm, peach preserves, sweet tea. They sat on the quilt while the sun dipped lower. Aunt Mirabel surprised Lily by bringing a small pie and placing it wordlessly at her side. Later, Lily would notice a few extra rows had been added to the hem of her wedding dress, neat and even. Mirabel had always sewn her care sideways. As dusk painted the sky in purples and ember gold, Lily and August rose and stepped into the field. They moved without music, their dance more sway than step. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, and his hand at her back was steady, respectful, real. The cotton surrounded them, soft as snowfall, the air thick with the hush of dusk and something too full for words. In that quiet, August whispered just once, "You were never small, Lily. Only the world's eyes were too dim to see you." She held him tighter. When the night deepened, stars broke open overhead. Lanterns were lit, their glow soft against the sky. The guests thinned, drifting away with the wind, but Lily and August remained beneath the tree. They spoke little. The thread still wrapped around their wrists, loose now, but intact. Lily stared at the sky. "Did you ever think," she asked, "that love might find you when you had already given up searching?" "I didn't give up," he said. "I just stopped looking for what wasn't real. And me. You're real." He kissed her then, not with passion, but with peace. It was the kind of kiss that came at the end of a long letter. A signature written with two hands. Later, they sat side by side on the quilt, the earth warm beneath them, the air ripe with the scent of cotton and new beginnings. Lily rested her hand over August's heart. "It feels steady," she said. "It's because you're near." "I think," she whispered, "this is the wedding I was meant for." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fanfare or promises. It comes as thread, as warmth, as a field full of white blossoms that bloom despite the wind. And for Lily Bell Franklin, once rejected for standing small in a world too blind to bend down and see her, it came as cotton turned to silk in the hands of a man who never asked her to grow taller, only to be seen. So if ever you find yourself left at a chapel's door, told you are not enough, not whole, not tall enough to be loved, remember Lily. Remember that not all flowers bloom tall. Some grow closest to the heart, where the light is softer, and the soil, though quiet, never forgets how to hold something gently. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best weddings begin with a walk through the fields.